Hi, I'm Christian. Welcome back to another On the Road video brought to you by ApplianceVideo.com. Stop. Before beginning any repair, always be sure to disconnect the power to the appliance. It is also recommended to test the outlet for proper voltage. Today we're working on a Whirlpool over-the-range microwave. The customer's complaint is that when they went to use the microwave, it ran for about 10 seconds and then completely died. So we've already diagnosed that the actual issues in the actual capacitor and took out the actual inline fuse. So today we're going to be replacing both of those parts. The tools you will need to complete this repair are a number 2 Phillips screwdriver and a pair of needle nose pliers. To begin the repair, we first must remove the grill. There are two number 2 Phillips screws that hold the grill in at the left and right sides. We're going to be removing them both. Once the screws have been removed, we can go ahead and lift out and up on the grill and set it aside. Next, we need to remove the wrap. To do so, originally this is going to be installed above a range. It does have to be uninstalled from that position and set down in a workable position so you can get to all the screws. So to begin, we're going to be removing the 9 screws on the very back. And these screws are all number 2 Phillips. We can now remove the screws on the top, and there are several. We're going to begin by removing the ones that hold the actual blower fan bracket on. And there's 2 on this one. Once the 2 screws have been removed, we can lift up on the top side of the bracket here and then slide it out from the 2 clips in the back. We'll set this aside. Be careful when you're handling any metal here. Some of the metal is very sharp. So once all the screws have been removed from the back and the top of the appliance, there were several screws underneath the actual microwave that actually secure the bottom of the wrap on the microwave. So we're gonna return it to the front position and then flip it over on its back. We're now going to remove the 8 Phillips screws that secure the wrap on the bottom. They go down the left side and the right side. So it's just the 4 on the side. So once all the screws have been removed, we can now set the microwave in the upright position so we can remove the wrap. Now that the appliance is in the upright position, to finish removing the wrap, we're going to go on each side and pull out from the back and then push out, or just pull out, I should say, from the front. There are some clips on each side that the front of the wrap actually gets tucked into the actual chassis. Just like that. Then we can go ahead and lift up on the wrap while fishing the actual power cord here through the opening. So be careful when you do so. Like I said, some of the metal is pretty sharp. So once that's fished through, we'll grab the wrap and then set the wrap aside. We do have to remove this sub panel here. It's just a piece of metal here with some openings for ventilation. There's 2 number 2 Phillips screws that secure this panel onto the chassis. So we're going to remove them both. Once the last screw has been removed, we can now remove the whole panel. Be careful when you're doing so because this panel is very sharp. Now that the wrap's been removed, the first thing before diagnosing or touching any component, we want to make sure that the actual capacitor has been discharged. To discharge the capacitor, we're going to use some sort of insulated screwdriver, and we're going to go across all 3 terminals and touch the ground or grounding component, just like this sheet metal here. Make sure we rub them pretty well. And sometimes if they're holding a charge, it'll spark here when you touch the screwdriver to the terminals and the ground. So now that it's been fully discharged, it's now safe to work on the microwave. Now that we have access to the capacitor, we're going to be removing the wires that plug into the capacitor. So on the white and the red wires, there is a locking tab that we have to push in before we are able to pull it out. So once you push it in, you pull it directly off. And then the diode just pulls directly off. And once the wires have been removed from the capacitor, we can now remove the number 2 Phillips screw that secures the actual capacitor on the bracket. The screw is in between the actual capacitor and the high voltage transformer. So we're gonna remove it. Once the screw's been removed, we can now remove the actual capacitor with the bracket. We're gonna tilt the capacitor to the side and then pull off the bracket from the chassis. Just like that. Now we'll remove the assembly. Now that the bracket and the capacitor have been removed, we do have to separate the capacitor from the bracket. We're just gonna flex the bracket open and then pull the actual capacitor straight off. We can now remove the line fuse from the noise filter. We're just gonna pull it directly off. Now that we have our new capacitor, let's install it. So when you get the new capacitor, we do have to reuse the old bracket that was on the old capacitor. So we're just gonna push the new capacitor directly over the bracket just like this until it's locked in place. We can now install the bracket and capacitor onto the chassis. Next, we're gonna line up the capacitor. There's a tab here on the actual bracket that gets tucked under an opening on the actual chassis. So we're gonna line up or position the capacitor and bracket and then push that tab in the opening and then let the capacitor and bracket rest on the chassis. We can now re-secure the capacitor and bracket with the number 2 Phillips screw we removed earlier. Well, this may be quite a bit of a challenge, but just like that. So once the capacitor is secure, we can now reattach the 3 wires we removed from it earlier. The white wire goes on the bottom side by itself. And then the red wire goes on top with the diode. Just like that. We can now remove the line fuse from the noise filter. We're just gonna pull it directly off. We can now install the new line fuse onto the noise filter. We're gonna line it up and push it directly on. Once the fuse has been installed, we can now reinstall the sub panel. We're gonna line up the sub panel here and then re-secure the sub panel with the 2 number 2 Phillips screws we removed earlier. The next step is to reinstall the wrap. We're going to fish the actual power cord through the opening for the blower motor. We're just gonna put it through and put the shell on the unit here. And once we're trying to line up the actual shell, there are tabs inside the actual sides on the left and right side that get tucked in to the control panel area and then the left chassis of the unit. So we're just tugging them in before we install the screws. Once they are fully seated, if you pull on the shell, you won't be able to pull that part out, and it won't be loose, and it'll be nice and flush. So just like that. So now we'll go ahead and turn the unit around and start installing the screws. Next, we can install the 9 number 2 Phillips screws on the rear of the appliance. Once the 9 screws have been fastened, we can now reinstall the cover for the actual blower motor. So we're just gonna put these 2 tabs inside the actual slots, and then we're gonna pivot the back side towards the top of the wrap. And then we can secure the top side with the 2 number 2 Phillips screws that we removed earlier. The next step is to secure the top of the actual wrap with the 6 beveled screws, and these are number 2 Phillips as well. So they're going to be the longer beveled screws, and these go across the top. Next step is to gain access to the actual bottom of the appliance so we can secure the actual bottom of the wrap to the bottom of the appliance or the chassis. Now we can install the 8 remaining screws on the bottom of the actual appliance. There's going to be 4 on the left side and 4 on the right side, and they are all number 2 Phillips. Now we can tip the appliance upright and install the grill. We're going to light up the grill. Once the grill's been lined up, we can go ahead and secure the grill with the 2 number 2 Phillips screws we removed earlier. Now with the grill installed, this will complete your repair. Thank you for watching another quality in-home repair video brought to you by ApplianceVideo.com.